Howdy, Dennis Bradford here. Let's think some about being, feeling, and doing better. What's the solution to the important problem of universals? I explain here what the problem of universals is and offer a solution to it. It may initially seem too irrelevant to be included in this playlist, but it's not, and I explain why. The problem of universals is a fundamental problem in ontology, which again is the study of being. Ontologists, metaphysicians, ask, what kinds of entities constitute the world? They try to understand what fundamental categories of existence there are in an effort to understand becoming better. In the previous video, for example, I mentioned that Leibniz argued for the thesis that monads exist and are fundamental constituents of the world. The reason to understand becoming better is to make better decisions. The best motive for doing ontology is ethical. Solving any ontological problem presupposes an understanding of what an entity or existent is. I argued previously, see videos 22 through 24, that to be an entity is to be multiply singleoutable. In other words, subject to 2-in-1 identity judgments. So, what's the ontological problem? What's the solution to it that involves universals? Is it the best solution? In other words, are universals entities? If so, are we able to use understanding them to help us emotionally? If so, how? I argue in this video that universals are entities and address topic 3 in the next video. 1. The fact to be understood is the recurrence of qualities. We previously noted that without at least the repetition of qualities, we'd be unable to emerge from the primordial chaos and survive. In other words, the problem is to understand qualities, features, characteristics, commonalities. All particulars, all individual forms have qualities. A sheet of paper, for example, has a shape, size, weight, chemical composition, texture, and so on. It's impossible to single out a particular form unless it has qualities. Two sheets of paper may share, have, be the same color. If two sheets of paper are white, then the quality whiteness recurs in both. How should such recurrence be understood? It's important to note that this problem has nothing to do with language. Assuming that dogs or elephants or seals don't have language, they can be trained to notice recurrence. They too live in a world in which qualities recur. There'd be no intelligibility without qualities. So, the problem of universals is grounded on phenomenological fact. 2. Some philosophers seem to start by thinking about language rather than the world as we experience it. They then wind up with foolish accounts, such as the nominalist one, that recurrence is because the same word, namely white, is true of both pieces of paper. That's true, but why is that word applicable? The two sheets are indistinguishable with respect to color, and that's the case whether there's an appropriate color word or not. Following Plato's theory of forms, other philosophers mix the problem of generality into the problem of universals with extremely confusing results. When we set aside language and generality, it turns out that there are two main theories, the Resemblance Theory and the Identity Theory. For more, see Paniat Butchross, Being Qua Being, Chapter 7. The Resemblance Theory describes the state of affairs by saying that piece of paper A exactly resembles piece of paper B. The Identity Theory describes the state of affairs by saying that A and B have the same color. The structure of my argument here is, since there are two options and the Resemblance Theory option fails, we ought to adopt the Identity Theory. What is the logically coherent and perspicuous account offered by the resemblance theorist? It turns out there isn't one. Begin with the fact of indistinguishability. The color of A is a form, object, thing. Let's name it W1. The color of B is also a form. Let's name it W2. If the resemblance theorist simply described their indistinguishability by claiming that W1 resembles W2, would that be true? No, because it's too vague. It's logically incomplete. After all, any two forms resemble each other in some respect or other. If so, without further specification, the concept, principle of classification, of resemblance would be useless. No statement of the form A resembles B is either true or false. Logically complete resemblance statements have the form X resembles Y more than W resembles Z. What, though, could such statements mean? They obviously couldn't mean, in our case, that there's a direct resemblance between W1 and W2. The claim is that there's a relation of difference between two instances of resemblance. Quote, if A resembles B more than C resembles D, a relation of resemblance may be coherently supposed to hold only between A and B, and again between C and D, end quote. Unfortunately for the resemblance theory, it's senseless to suppose that it holds between A and B, or between C and D. Why? It can't hold between A and B because, again, the statement would be too vague to have a truth value. The same, of course, goes for C and D. Since the resemblance theorist is forced to rely on logically incomplete statements, it's not really a clear alternative to the identity theory. The identity theory uses our innate ability to make 2-in-1 judgments. What statement does the identity theorist think describes the indistinguishability? W1 is W2. Simple. In other words, to state that two qualities are indistinguishable, or resemble each other, is simply to state that they are identical, that they are the same universal. If so, qualities are universals. Why does this matter with respect to living well emotionally? That's our next topic. Let's end emotional distress.